Last September, the architecture and urban planning firm Cooper Robertson was chosen from 21 applicants to design a master plan for the redevelopment of nearly 200 waterfront acres in Middletown, Connecticut, along the Connecticut River. Joining us to discuss that project and master planning in general is Mike Aziz, a partner and director of urban design at Cooper Robertson. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Mike, let's start our conversation by discussing what you're working with at Middletown and what you envision it becoming.
Sure. So Middletown, Connecticut, it's a thriving mid-sized city right in the heart of Connecticut along the Connecticut River, about 20 or 30 minutes south of Hartford, certainly drivable down to New Haven and the shore. It has long struggled with its relationship to the Connecticut River. As it was developed over time, in many places like this, industrial uses, manufacturing uses took over its waterfront, created a great economic boon for the city, but disconnected its residents from that asset that in many ways is the reason why Middletown emerged as such a powerful shipping and commerce center in the first place. And in the 60s, as urban renewal pressures took hold and a new highway was constructed along the riverfront, it became even more severed from that great asset. And so the goal of this master plan is to reconnect Middletown and its community with the riverfront, physically, environmentally, and at a cultural level as well. So physically, trying to stitch the roads and walkways and bike routes back to the riverfront in a safe and continuous way to make it a vibrant mixed-use destination, both for Middletown residents, but also for residents of the region. And environmentally, to go back and make it a cleaner and safer place as it emerges from its post-industrial past. Of course, keeping in mind flood risk and all the resilience measures one has to take into account when designing now for the future. And lastly, culturally, there's a great history of the local indigenous Wangunk tribe having an influence on both the shore of the Middletown side of the river, but also on the Portland side just across the river. They actually traversed it regularly. They had camps on both sides. And so trying to understand what the influence that group had over the formation of Middletown, the use of its river and its shoreline, and trying to bring back that into some of the discussion, as well as, I should say, the neighborhoods that were displaced by the construction of the highway many years ago. It was the downtown neighborhoods were home to many Italian American neighborhoods, African American neighborhoods, thriving business communities that were almost overnight displaced from the area. So in our master plan, we're trying to bring that history forward for future generations to engage with and learn from. And I'd say the last piece there is Middletown's role in the slave trade, trying to come to grips with that and have it be part of the kind of public narrative going forward for Middletown and its residents, so that there's a level of awareness and reflection of that period of time in the city.
You mentioned that this is going to be a mixed-use development. What will be some of the components that will be included?
Sure. So there was a kind of set of goals and I'd say a vision for this waterfront that goes back decades. They've been planning, the community has been planning for the revitalization of this area for almost 40 years at this point. And I'd say one consistent theme that crosses all of those studies that have come before ours is that the desire to make this a vibrant and sort of energetic extension of downtown. So picking up on those goals, we envision this as being a place that has some level of housing, affordable housing, home ownership, as well as rentals, mixed in with retail, restaurants, and some level of commercial development that is in balance with a generous amount of openscape, landscape restoration, shoreline stabilization, all sort of intertwined together in a very livable neighborhood, new waterfront neighborhood.
Mhm. This project is informed by what I would consider to be an unusual amount of community feedback. You had two workshops last October and December that drew 228 participants. Another 67 filled out an online survey. 93 others answered storefront surveys. When you take that in as a whole, what were some of the responses? How are they? How do you think they might be worked into the final vision and the final product?
Developing this plan without the community would be impossible. It was such a high level goal the city had established for this to be a plan that was inclusive of all the diverse voices that are in Middletown and Middletown's sort of partner communities around the area and key stakeholders within the city. So as you said, we've reached a lot of people. Those numbers continue to grow every day. We actually have worked with the city to create a physical storefront on Main Street. So 7 days a week, during all business hours, any community resident could come in and could see our progress. We have a large scale model there. We have sketches and drawings. We have interactive activities for them to engage with. The idea was that this was just very open, transparent, and inclusive process. So, what did we learn from that? We learned what the community's priorities were. When you canvass a community as large as this, you'll get feedback that they want just about everything, and that's not uncommon. But you can't have just about everything, or at least you can't have that on day one. So the process has really been saying, of these different elements, what is the highest priority? What in what location would that like to be in? So we really work with the community to try to define where their goals are in terms of the highest need. We've also delved deeper into some of those individual program elements. So if housing is a need, and we know it's a need from simply a market point of view, there's a housing shortage in Middletown. It has been for some time. What type of housing are we talking about? Are we talking about townhomes? Are we talking about low-rise apartments, mid-rise, high-rise, single-family, duplexes? And so we've, through a series of community workshops, sharing sketches, sharing images from other great places, have been able to get feedback from the community on the types of things that they really think are appropriate for Middletown, and at a scale and density that they feel will be relatable and compatible with the great parts of Middletown's downtown today.
Mike, when you're working on a master plan, not just this one, but in general, is it typical for the municipality to have a pretty good idea what it wants, or are you starting from scratch and then working from a blank page?
Yeah, it varies, John. I would say that this municipality, because it has been so focused on this area for so long, had a very clear vision of what it wanted to do, and because it had done plans that were not implemented, they had an understanding of where the roadblocks and hurdles would be, and I give the mayor and his leadership great credit in having the foresight to have passed with the community support a $50 million infrastructure bond that made possible will make possible the redevelopment of its waterfront now, and clears many of the challenges that it faced in the past. So included in that is funding for a new municipal garage downtown that could serve some of these waterfront uses. just prior to putting in that bond, I'd say the most significant catalyst for this waterfront redevelopment was the decommissioning of its wastewater treatment plant directly on the waterfront, right in the middle of the study area. And without that foresight to make that public investment, to move it north of town, I couldn't see development being as attractive to any degree as it is now for the future. So there were, through the years, through the various administrations in the city, they've taken those measures that we would sometimes come in and have to coach a municipality through and say, before you get to implementing this grand vision, there are some basics that you need to address first, and those basics here have been addressed, and I feel like Middletown's really at a turning point in its history where it can finally reclaim its waterfront for those reasons.
Do you think, just as a parenthetical, but do you think that the wastewater plant was one of the things that kept the waterfront separate from the rest of the city?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it has an aroma too. Wastewater treatment plants have an aroma, and even if they don't, if you're distant, it just does the psychology of knowing that there's still heavy infrastructure down on the waterfront. It keeps some people away. So yeah, absolutely. I think that the decommissioning of that, and now we're at a point where we can think about all the things that you could do with that 5 or 6 acres that are right on the waterfront.
Yeah,
it's right at the bend in a river, so the water's calm. You look up and down the river; it almost is a 90-degree turn at that point. It's just such a fantastic site, and the city owns it. I mean, how great is that? The city owns almost all of its waterfront, which is also often a real challenge in these large-scale plans is who owns what. And over time, the city has been very strategic in creating a continuous block of ownership along its waterfront so that it can it can control its own destiny, maintain the quality of the work that will be done, open it to development where appropriate. They're really well positioned at this point.
You mentioned the mayor. The mayor felt compelled to assure the community that funding was in place to move this development forward. Is it your experience that funding is still an issue when you get into a master plan, or is it pretty much in place by the time you guys come onto the scene?
It varies. I think this is a unique opportunity that we came across. I think it's why you saw 21 different submissions for this project, to be honest. Because it was very clear from the way the RFP was written, from early conversations with the city, that this was not a plan to be put on a shelf. And I think that's why you saw so many very serious and credentialed firms from really all around the country submit for this. And I think Cooper Robertson's track record of taking on projects like this that are very implementation focused, it's very much about execution, bridging that conversation between private interest, municipal oversight and guidance, and community interest. I mean, that's where great urban design is created, when those three parties can come together and speak the same language, and that's often around design, and visuals and graphics really are the things that facilitate those conversations. It was clear that they were having a moment. That moment was about to happen, and we wanted to be part of it. If you look at our work at Harbor Point down in Stamford, Connecticut, very similar point in time. It was planned during the Great Recession, 2008. It was planned with the development community and the city and the community all working together. It was built out against all expectations. It's one of the most successful large-scale developments Connecticut's ever seen. And what it takes is real rigor in the way you do urban design, and not to do fantastical ideas that that don't have a grounding in the market today, in the reality, in what the community will support. And that takes time. It takes commitment on the city's part to a process. There are very few shortcuts in a process like that. You have to be able to have hard conversations, difficult conversations, and come out with agreements that benefit all. And that's what we've tried to facilitate as part of this. And that's the reason why it will take about a year to put this master plan together. After this year, we will be working with the city to draft any and all legislation that would be needed to enable this plan, which could include rezonings, that could include design guidelines. And then we'll be on board to help the city pass that, help rally the community around this vision that they've created, and have the Planning and Zoning Commission supported by adopting.
Beyond the kind of the municipal legislative elements of it and the zoning elements, well, what will Cooper Robertson's role be once the master plan is completed? Do you have a role in that?
Yeah, so after the master plan, that's when we go into the legislative phases, and we're hoping that we'll knock everyone's socks off with our design work, and maybe we'll stick around and do some of the public space design. We've designed waterfronts. We did Barry Park City's waterfront esplanade. There'll definitely be an esplanade here. We're architects too, so we'd love to do some buildings. Whether that would be for the city or maybe we'd be in contention to do some for private developers, I think is yet to be seen. But another key aspect of implementing a plan from the city's point of view, as I said, they own a lot of the land at the waterfront, is attracting developers that have that understand the city's goals and vision for this area and can deliver projects that are aligned with those. And often Cooper Robertson is brought on as an advisor for the city to help either draft those developer RFPs that go out to market or review proposals, help select developers, things like that. So, it's to be determined if we'll play that role in Middletown, but we've certainly done it with other cities.
Mike, thanks for spending a couple minutes with us to discuss this project. It really sounds interesting.
Great. Very welcome, John. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
And thanks to our audience for joining us. This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction.
Thank you.